Here's the number one mistake people are making about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let's go. This one's actually going to surprise you. And it's one of the things that is an easy tell for me when people, whether they're current members or former members of the church, you see a lot with former members of the church, right? You'll see like, hey, I didn't know this, right? Or the church didn't teach me this, right? And it comes down to one thing, and that's study. Now, the church has been teaching us to study and recommended we study at least 1 hour a day for a long time, for many decades. Matter of fact, in 1979, Elder Hunter said this, just one of many you can probably go find. He said, talking about studying, it would be ideal if an hour could be spent each day. But if that much cannot be had, a half an hour on a regular basis would result in a substantial accomplishment. Then he goes on to say a quarter of an hour is a little time, but it's surprising how much enlightenment and knowledge can be acquired in a subject so meaningful. And so, again, 1979. And so I did a little work on this, and just charting this out, not just confirmed what I think we may all think, but visually it's kind of like, oh, wow. So what I did is I looked at church activity, right, by age, right? So only as adults, right? So 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, and then someone who's a lifelong member. I'm a man, so average Latter-day Saint men live 84 years old, 10 years longer than the average man. And so you can see, obviously, somebody who's 20 years old only has about 2 years of activity as an adult in the church. And then you know, obviously you go down, and at the end of your life, if you stay active your entire life, 66 years. I then looked at minutes spent studying, right? And so I broke it into 4 groups. One, if all you did is went to church, you didn't spend 1 minute outside of church learning, then I looked at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 60 minutes of daily study. And people, I'm just telling you, this chart, like I said, it actually bolstered my testimony and my everything that I thought around studying, but it really shows why it's so important. So let's take a look at the chart. So when we look at people who only go to church, the gap between somebody who's 20 years old and a lifelong member, yes, there is a significant amount of minutes, but I believe it, and the chart shows this, that the actual knowledge gap is not that great, right? And that's not surprising because, you know, there's 52 Sundays in a year. We go to 50 because during Christmas and Easter, and then obviously if you take out General Conference then as well. So there's only about 48 Sundays that we go to church, right? And have a lesson. And it follows a very specific structure. So you may only be getting a certain topic once every 4 years, right? So to me, this makes a lot of sense that the knowledge gap is very small here. What's really interesting is once you get to that 30 to 60 minute gap or studying on a daily basis, I mean, look at that gap between somebody who's 20 and somebody who's a lifelong member, right? That knowledge gap is significant. And if you do the recommended 1 hour a day, I mean, to me, when I see this, it's like, oh my. But here's what's really surprising. So this is based off of my opinion and being on social media forever and being older than dirt and working with a lot of youth and adults and talking to people who former members and current members. There is a very distinct difference between somebody who studies an hour a day and somebody who only goes to church. And so what for example, if there's a creator on here who just pastors the church, and one of the things he says all the time is why didn't the church teach me this? And it's that very victim mentality. And you can tell that that's somebody who only went to church and studied very little, right? Because they'll say things like, I didn't know, or the church didn't teach me. You're right. The church has told you over and over again that if all you do is go to church and you don't study, yeah, you're going to be susceptible to not knowing. And as you go through life, you're eventually going to learn things because it's going to take a long time to learn. So you may be in your late 20s or 30s before you learn something because you haven't done the work. Because the people I know who are in this group that study an hour a day, you'll never hear that victim mentality. They'll say, oh, I've read this. Or if they don't know something, they'll say, oh, I'll have to look into that, right? Because they are always hungering for more knowledge. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, why don't you read this book? Because it talks about that topic. Because again, if we go back to that chart, people who study an hour a day, right? That knowledge gap is significant, right? And even if you do the minimum of 30 minutes a day, and again, remember, when this council came out, this is well before, flow charts and spreadsheets that we could easily calculate the data. You could do it by hand. That's how we used to do it. But this council was given well before we thought about doing this type of stuff. And so what I find really fascinating is just this gap. And it's really bolstered my my opinion that, if you study that minimum of 30 minutes, but that 60 minutes, you will have the knowledge you need. And we know in the scriptures that you can't earn enlightenment. You can't earn that knowledge without having done the work. That's just not how the Lord works. The Lord requires us to read, study, and pray. He says it throughout the scriptures over and over again. And Israelites would have served themselves well had they followed the prophet, listened to his voice, and done the things that they were supposed to. And one of those things is studying every single day. Am I perfect at it? No. Does this change my mentality? Absolutely. Because what I don't want to do is be 84 years old and go, I could have known so much more. And so my goal is to be in that group where, as I get older, which, let's just say my years are shorter, I'm somewhere in between here, is I want to continue to grow that knowledge. Because I don't want to have that victim mentality of, the church didn't teach me. Because the church has taught me for a long time that I need to study. Have a good one.